Good evening, Mr. Gary Edwards. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you, sir. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, and welcome all to Book Corner Extra Time with author of this fantastic piece of work, Revie's Plan for Leeds United, Summer of '63, Mr. Gary Edwards. Before we get into the book, Gaz, I want a little bit of your background. How did you get into writing football books? And you're a big Leeds United fan, so talk about yourself a little bit for the first few minutes, please.
Well, obviously, I've been a Leeds fan since the early 60s. My dad took me like most people, and it became a thing. And well, it became a monster, really, to be honest with you. It took over my life, and I just carried on going, watching Leeds everywhere possible, and it's continued to this day. I never even thought of writing until a mate of mine, a West Ham fan, died now, bless him, Alan Osborne. He went into publishing magazines, journal. It was a dental thing that he had, and it were his idea. And I thought, it will work, and it did. And I started telling stories of what we'd done in his travels, here, there, and everywhere. And it took off. It was great.
Is this your first book that you've written about Leeds, or have you written other publications about Leeds United?
No, this is my seventh book, actually. Yeah. My first book was Paint It White, which Alan, well, the idea behind it was him who planted the idea in my head, if you like, and then we did Paint It White, which is still selling today, thankfully. So, yeah, and they made a stage play out of it. It went to the West End. It went all over the UK. Wow. And I've carried on doing it ever since. It's been great.
So let's just briefly talk about that Paint It White. When you say Paint It White, I mean there was a Rolling Stones track, wasn't there, about Paint It Black? I mean, this is Paint It White. Clearly it's about Leeds United. What's the concept about that book?
Paint It White was basically my travels watching Leeds from the early 60s.
Got ya.
And the Paint It White stemmed from the fact that I run a decorating company. Yes. And we refuse to paint any red paint at all in our business.
White rose, red rose.
The red rose, of course, yeah. Our friends at Old Trafford, and we will not paint. We remove red paint free of charge, and we will not paint red. And that's been 40 years now, and it just took off, and people took the idea. And that's where it stemmed from, and it took off a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be. If you know what I mean, these people got in touch with me and asked me if it would be okay to look at the prospect of putting it on stage. They had a 2-week tour in Leeds to see what it was like. They had some great actors. I couldn't believe it, and it was all a bit surreal, to be quite honest with you. And then it went UK. It went all over the country.
Who played you, Gaz?
Sorry?
Who played you?
Gary Dunnington. An actor called Gary Dunnington. He's been in Sharp and all sorts of programmes. Gary Dunnington, absolutely fine actor, superb actor. And he took the baton and ran with it. And it, like I say, it was surreal to sort of like go into a little theatre, not knowing what it was going to be like, and met the actors beforehand. I'd met them, obviously, but it was absolutely superb. They absolutely did an unbelievable job. Unbelievable.
Absolutely fantastic. And for those people really that don't, understand English football, we have a team called Manchester United who, I know you're a Leeds fan, but arguably are the biggest club in Britain. And then we have Liverpool, and they have a big rivalry with winning major tournaments. But the rivalry between Manchester United and Leeds United almost eclipses that of the big two traditionally. There's absolute hatred, isn't there? It goes back to the War of the Roses, and
Yeah,
White Rose, they absolutely hate the Red Rose. Now, I don't know whether it's the same on the other way. I'm a Birmingham City supporter. There's a lot
right.
of rivalry between Birmingham City and Aston Villa. I like both
Yeah,
teams as I've grown up, and I'm a granddad, and I've got family on both sides of the
yeah,
divide. But where
yeah.
you are, there is absolute hatred and loathing, isn't there?
Yeah, I suppose it is.
Yeah.
It sounds a strong word, but it's not. But we're not keen on them. Let's put it that way.
Well, this book really needed to be written because, I've been watching football since I was a kid. I'm 58 years of age now, and I would say that the greatest team that I've ever seen play football in this country is Leeds United. I'm certainly
Right.
not a
Yeah.
Don Revie
Yeah.
fan of the England years. I think he was the wrong
No. No.
choice for a number of reasons. But
I think he
what
agreed that as well. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but what I'm
Yeah.
going to say to you is Don Revie the greatest signing that Leeds have ever made, or is it Bobby Collins?
Well, as a player, it's got to be Bobby Collins,
Yeah.
without a doubt. And that again, in turn, is down to Don Revie.
Yes.
He played. He came and played for Leeds, obviously in 1958, and he's had a fairly good career. He got 6 England caps. He sort of invented the Revie plan.
Yeah.
It was Johnny Williamson who was his good friend at Man City that actually devised the plan. Obviously taken from the Hungarians, but it was Don who brought these players. He had a keen eye, and it was that season, that summer, that he began to put everything together. And Bobby Collins was a masterstroke. He brought Bobby Collins from Everton for 25,000, and Everton fans were seething over it, And then he added in later years Johnny Giles. And then, Billy Bremner were here before Johnny Giles. And he just had that eye. He knew exactly what he wanted, and he built it, and he built it, and he built it, and it worked. And he never gets the recognition that he deserves from me, and neither do Leeds United. But we know that summer of '63 was one hell of a summer. Really was.
I would say that to a lot of people they don't because they've always had the tag of Dirty Leeds,
Yeah,
etc., and the Neely men. But I had a wonderful hour and a half with Johnny Giles and sniffer Alan Clark as well,
right, yeah.
and both of the boys were telling me that we won as much as what Liverpool's Bill Shankly did, in those days. More so John,
Yeah,
because John was there before
yeah,
Alan. Alan come after the 1969 FA Cup final, of course,
that's right, yeah,
Leicester
yeah, yeah,
City against
yeah. He
Manchester
got man of the
City.
match, yeah, yeah.
But John, one of the big selling points was the fact that Bobby Collins had signed for Leeds United. Leeds United were a second division team. Leeds
That's
United
right.
were almost staring the third division in the
Yes,
face.
there was.
What Don Revie done for Leeds United was absolutely astronomical. And you've alluded to the fact of the Revie plan, but Don's always maintained that it wasn't him, it was his best mate in football that
That
devised that plan. Don's
that's
never
right.
really took the credit. He's always took the abuse, if you like, the match fixings,
Yes, yes.
nothing found. The Bob Stokoe, you've talked about that in the book, nothing found. There's a lot of nothing found, but there's a lot of mud that was thrown at Leeds United, and a certain amount of that mud will always stick. But again, nothing ever found.
No, no, and that's the. It's a bit of a bugbear. That dirty Leeds tag, like you say, is a misdemeanour
It's all
really
the
in
clubs put
itself.
together,
Because
wasn't it?
it was put together by
Yeah,
the FA.
yeah, but
It was put together by the
and it
FA.
was all the Leeds United teams of that season, not
That's
the
right.
first team, all of the teams, wasn't it?
That's right. And Leeds had actually had one player, which is quite unbelievable. They had one player sent off in 43 years.
Yeah,
And and the second player to be sent off was Gary Sprake in a friendly against Scunthorpe. So in 45 years, you know, it was absolutely ridiculous. And it was I don't know if vendetta is the right word. It was a complete hatred campaign, I would say, because it was in the. I was as you say in the book. I was speaking to Duncan Revie. I got to be really good friends with Duncan in a previous book I was writing, and he still has the copy of the FA News or Review, as it were called, and it has that actual slander in it, you know, and like you say, they actually took on board that there were all teams involved, juniors, reserves, you know, and Leeds didn't have one single player sent off that season that they cited, whereas our friends at Old Trafford had 5 sent off, just as an example, you know, and it just stuck, and like you say, it stuck, and a lot of supporters still to this day sing it. Obviously, Leeds fans sing it now to get back at them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's almost like a badge of honour, isn't it?
That's right. They sing it back to them, and it just ends it really. And people don't really know why they're singing it. You know, there were actually some people singing it even during David O'Leary's reign, when we were called somebody's second team. You know. Well, we like that team, and we never liked that. If you know what I mean, we Leeds, you know.
It's a little bit like Millwall, isn't it? Nobody likes us. We're Millwall. Leeds have always had that, but it's always been for me, and I always look at football impartially. Again, I'll go back. The greatest team that I've ever seen in English football is Leeds United. I think
Right.
that Manchester City would run Leeds of the 70s very, very close. But what I'll
Yeah.
always maintain is that Manchester City have 2 teams of international players, and they have a team for the league, team for the Champions League, and then they play their kids or a reserve team in the FA Cup and the League Cup.
Yeah.
Leeds
Yeah.
United didn't ever do that, or it wasn't like
No.
that back in the 60s and 70s. John was saying to
No.
me, you know, we won honours with 14, 15, maybe 16 players. Sniffer said
That's right.
exactly the same. You know, if you
Yeah.
were not even 100% fit, you played, and that's the way it was. And Sniffer said to
Yeah.
me, he said, Paul, we were going for the treble every season, but with a
That's
really
right.
small squad. And
Yeah.
what always, when people, because you always have to have balance for me, it's always about balance.
Yeah.
Nobody ever mentions that Leeds United were cheated out of the 1973 Cup Winners' Cup final, and they
Yeah.
against AC Milan, and were
Yeah.
cheated out of the 1975 European Cup final against Bayern
That's
Munich,
right.
and
That's right.
they were cheated,
There
100%
was
cheated.
100%.
But
100%.
but again, Gaz, that's always forgotten, isn't it? It's never ever brought
Yeah.
up.
Well, people. I say it's convenient, really. Isn't it? People
Yeah, it is.
don't want to hear that. You know.
No, and I'm
Um.
totally unbiased because I'm a football fan and I'm a
Yeah.
lover of football. Let's go
Yeah.
back to, again, another Manchester United in 92, the class of 92, the greatest group of kids that we've ever seen come through in British football. No, that's not true. We had the
No, it's
babes in
not
the
true.
we had the babes in the 50s, and we had Leeds
Yeah.
United in the 60s. Most of that Leeds team that conquered English football and would have conquered European football were kids coming through the youth academy there at Leeds United. Something that Don had been passed the baton on, believed in it, and ran with it, didn't he?
That's right. Yeah. Bill Lampton and Jack Taylor,
Yeah.
his predecessors, actually had a young Norman Hunter there, and Jack Charlton had been there for quite a while.
Yeah.
And like you say, Don saw the potential, and obviously it's hold up how we're going to go to Bournemouth, and Harry Reynolds tore his letter to go because he realised the potential, and he just it was so caring with Don. I got to know the family. I never knew Don as I met Don a few times,
Yeah.
and I met the players a few times, but I really got to know Don, if you like, after he died through his family. Duncan Revie, who sadly died as well, and Kim Revie, his daughter, and Elsie, bless her. They were a fantastic family, really, really close knit, and he portrayed that in his club. You know, like you say there, Paul. He tried it with England, and it was never going to work. That sort of thing at England, but at Leeds, he actually hit the nail on the head, and it hurts me that he never gets the recognition. And they were big friends with Bill Shankly. What a fantastic manager he was! What a fantastic manager! And they were big friends, you know. And the families were friends. They went out together, and it was just there were football in them days were absolutely incredible. I can name just about every team in that first division. I can name every single player. I can, you know, you can't do that these days. You know, it was just great. The football was fantastic, absolutely fantastic in them days. And it's such a shame that he don't. Again, I know it's repeating myself, but he doesn't get the recognition that he deserves. He was such a superb manager. It was, you know, it was far ahead of his time. There's no doubt about it.
100%, and you're absolutely spot on. I think the thing is when you're an international manager, you have the players and you have to deal with what goes on, and sometimes you pick players that the press want, and I don't really want to go into the England years because we're talking about the Leeds United years. But the Leeds United team, they were family. They were a close-knit group of players. They were all Don's sons, and that come across by both John and Alan. And Sniffer said to me, "You do know, Paul, who I'm talking about when I call him the boss." And to this day, I've done the interview probably 2-3 years ago with Sniffer, John more recently, but he wouldn't call him Don Revie. He wouldn't call him Don. He'd either call him Mr. Revie or the boss. You know who the boss is. And they were just so close. The closeness between him and Billy was phenomenal as well, wasn't it? Because he played with Billy, didn't he? For Leeds United, and Billy was homesick. He even went up to Scotland and he brought his girlfriend back. What Revie done for Leeds is unbelievable, and I think it's fantastic that you've written this book, Gary, because I've got so much out of the book. And as I say, I'm a football fan. I'm not a Leeds United supporter, but it's a great story of Leeds and how that club, because before Don, Leeds wasn't anything. Okay, after Don, you've had periods of time where you've been okay, but Don Revie is Leeds United.
We had a period, like you say, in the 50s when John Charles was obviously probably the world's greatest player at the time.
Yes.
And then he came back, which was a disappointment at the time. Was. But and Don didn't want him back.
Neither did Jack.
It set his plan, you know. But it's funny you should say about Birmingham City. Just on that is Don Revie. It took a Birmingham City fan to actually arrange for the statue at Ellen Road, which stands of Don Revie. Jim Cadman.
Right? How did Jim do that? Jim is a great man.
Jim Cadman, I got on absolutely fantastic with Jim Cadman, and he was the man behind the Don Revie statue at Ellen Road. It was his project. He got in touch with me and a few other Leeds fans. It was paid for by the supporters. We didn't have a penny from the club.
No.
And Jim Cadman, next time I speak to him, give my regards to him. He was the man behind Don Revie statue.
He's also the man behind a lot of stuff about Duncan Edwards as well.
He is, yeah. He did Cyril Regis and them at West Brom, yeah.
Absolutely. And he's the man behind Aston Villa's 40-year tribute as well. Jim Cadman is a great man of football. And it doesn't matter who you support. Football fans recognise fantastic achievements in football. And Don's up there.
That's precisely what Jim said, yeah.
But the Leeds United coming together. I mean, it didn't happen by accident. It happened by design. But John playing in the middle with Billy, that was more of an accident than design, because Bobby Collins had got injured against Torino in a European game, and John
That's
says
right.
to Don, I'd like to play in the middle a bit more, because when
Yeah.
John was bought, Matt Busby had fallen out of favour with John and played him on the wing, but
They always
but
played him on the right
yeah,
wing. Yeah,
but
yeah,
but
yeah,
but John was a central midfield player, but always pushed out a little bit, and Don took that little bit of a gamble, if you like. I mean, how can you have a gamble with John Giles and Billy Bremner? It's almost like ridiculous to even say that, isn't it?
incredible,
But
incredible,
for me, when
incredible.
you're looking at duos, Billy Bremner and Johnny Giles, the greatest to this day, the
Yeah,
greatest central
yeah,
midfield double act. And Alan Hudson, my friend Alan Hudson, I do many a podcast with Alan. He
yeah,
would say to me, it was the greatest test of anybody to play against John Giles and Billy Bremner. There was a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
rivalry again in the
Of course,
70s with Chelsea,
of
well,
course.
60s and
Yeah,
70s with
yeah,
Chelsea. But what I did want to
yeah.
mention about with Jack Charlton and John Charles, Jack also played at centre forward for Leeds United in the early days, didn't he?
Yes, yes, he did. He did. He did. Yeah. Like you say, he thought he were on his way out when John Charles came back.
Mm, yeah,
For the second time, which obviously didn't work, and John and Jack thought he were getting his nose pushed out again, and Don assured him that it was his place. But yeah, he played up front, did Jack, and he played at the back, and obviously devised that corner situation. The standing on the goal line.
yes.
That would have done everything, and Les Cocker actually. Les Cocker devised it to stand on the goal line, not impede the goalkeeper, but just sort of like make it awkward.
We're just
and
annoying.
England took it up, and now it happens quite a lot now.
I must admit, when I was coaching my kids' football, I'd always have someone stand on the goalkeeper, because I did
Yeah,
get that from Jack Charlton. That's what Jack used to do, not to
that's
impede
right.
him, just to annoy him and rent
Just to
space in his head.
just to be in the way. Yeah, yeah,
And again, Les
yeah,
Cocker, you've referenced, done so many great things at Leeds, was so instrumental there at Leeds United with Don
yeah,
Revie.
yeah.
There was a great little. Again, we hear an awful lot about the boot room at Liverpool, but there was also a boot room there at Leeds United, wasn't that never really
Oh, there
gets
was.
mentioned.
There was. Yeah, and well, it seems to be they gloss over Leeds United as a
Yeah,
team. They just seem to pick on the bad signs, and it's always, I won't say it's annoyed us. We're just gone with it now, but it's a thing that it hurt me for Revie's family, and the people who were involved, because they never again got the recognition that it's just basically with Leeds. He built a team. They were in front of everybody else without a shadow of a doubt.
yeah.
And the football league, didn't like it. There's no question about that. You talk about the European games, the European finals. We got screwed in a lot of league games, a lot of cup games.
West Bromwich Albion.
West Bromwich Albion. Do you know it's funny that, because I was speaking to Dave Cocker not long back about Les, his dad,
Yeah,
and he was telling me a story about Ray Tinkler.
yeah.
Leeds had beaten Northampton Town 6-1 in the '60s, mid '60s, and Ray Tinkler was refereeing, and he got a headache, and he asked Dr. Ian Adams, the Leeds United doctor, to have a look at it. And Dr. Adams says it's migraine. Basically moving along a bit. He had migraine, and he advised him not to referee the second half, but he did, and it was 3-1 at half time. And in the second half, the first thing he did was book Billy Bremner for dangerous play, and it went to tribunal, and Leeds took the case. Don Revie, Les Cocker, they all took with the Dr. Adams and with armed with this information.
Yeah.
And Ray Tinkler denied having a migraine.
Right.
Yeah, and honestly, it's gospel truth. He denied having a migraine. He actually said that he didn't, and blah, blah, blah. And outside the court, he apologised to Billy, saying that he really couldn't discredit himself in front of the FA.
Blimey.
And 5-6 years later, you saw what the proof in the pudding. And no, he wasn't a fan of Leeds, and that's just one referee. Some referees were fantastic with Leeds. When I was writing a book a few years ago, two referees that sprung to mind were Jack Taylor and Kirkpatrick.
Yes.
They were absolutely characters. Really, really good referees, but they were characters. And they knew the game, they knew the game inside out. And you don't get that now. You don't get that these days. The referees were fantastic. And it was just, I don't know, it's hard to explain really. There were certain ones that didn't like Leeds, but by and large, the referees weren't too bad. And but Ray Tinkler were a bad egg.
Yeah, Jack Taylor was famously a butcher, wasn't he, from Wolverhampton?
That's right, Wolverhampton,
here in the Black Country. I don't know much about Roger Kilpatrick, but he was arguably the greatest character. He used to make some right funny little signs, didn't he, when he was running and that?
Yeah. Mr. Pickwick.
He did, yeah. But again, a character, a larger-than-life character. What I didn't realise as well, because Leeds United in the second division eventually did get promoted into the first division and came within a gnat's whisker of winning the double in their first ever season. And I think John told me that Leeds were the first team to have achieved 60 points without actually winning the first division championship. That was unbelievable feat. I know that Ipswich Town have done it. They've come up and they've won the league, and Nottingham Forest have come up and they've won the league. But to have won the double in your first season, that would have been a football first. And it is a shame. Yeah, absolutely. It is a shame going forward that Leeds didn't actually win the treble, because them are two things that if you could put on Leeds United and the fact that they deserved it, those would have been two scenarios, two situations that they really would have deserved.
Well, those two things. I mean, like you say, they lost the league on goal average, believe it or not, which it were called then, and they lost in extra time against Liverpool in the final.
Yeah.
They froze a bit at Wembley in '65. To be honest, Bobby Collins admitted that, and Billy Gunn scored a great goal to take it into extra time. And but the treble in '70 was heartbreaking, really, because people don't realise, and you can look into this. It's unbelievable. In the running in the 1970, when Leeds were chasing a treble, Don actually gave the league. He sacrificed the league because they were going for the double, and obviously the treble. But they lost to the semi-final against Celtic in the European Cup. But they played three semi-finals against those from Old Trafford. We played at Hillsborough, and at Villa Park, and then finally beat them at Bolton. In between these, then they played two cup finals. People don't realise that they played two FA Cup finals in 1970.
Yeah, Chelsea.
They played Chelsea twice in a replay at Old Trafford. And in between these, they were having league games. When Leeds played Celtic on the Wednesday, we actually went to West Ham on the Thursday.
Yeah.
They played in a league game at West Ham the day after. And if you look at that congestion in 1970, it is really unbelievable. They were playing every other day, and then sometimes they had 2 days off and 3 days off, and it was incredible, absolutely incredible. It wouldn't happen now.
No, again, and if it did happen now, and you're right, it wouldn't, but they would have the squads to be able uh, to accommodate those
Yeah,
fixtures. You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
they'd almost make 10 and 11 changes like what they do in
That's
cup
right.
competitions. They didn't
That's
do
right.
that back in those days. But that, let's say that 63 season was phenomenal. And I says to 64, 65 season, and I said to John regarding that, because I didn't realise how close Leeds United came to winning the double. And I says
Yeah,
to John, what was your most unluckiest ground, John? And he said, St Andrews, Birmingham City. He said we
yeah, yeah,
drew 3-3.
yeah,
We were 3
yeah,
0 down. And
yeah.
you could argue that if Leeds United had won 4-3 or beat Birmingham City at St Andrews, they would have won the league. And then you're
Yeah.
going in to the FA Cup as league champions, and you never know what's gonna happen then. So just so close and fine margins.
It's right. It's St Andrews was that place because even in now then what year was that? 74 when they went on the 34
Yeah,
unbeaten
they did.
run.
Yeah, yeah.
It ended at St Andrews.
No, we,
You
we,
know,
we drew with you at St
that's
Andrews
right.
in
Joe Jordan.
1973. Joe Jordan
Joe
scored a goal
Jordan.
4 minutes
That's
from time, and then
right.
you were going to equal Burnley's record of 19, I think it was 2021,
That's yeah,
for
yeah.
30 games unbeaten. You were 29, and you went to the
That's right.
Victoria ground, and you were 2-0 up.
2-0 up.
Joe
2-0 up.
Jordan. Joe had a goal
Yeah,
disallowed.
yeah,
John come off after I think
yeah,
14 minutes,
yeah.
and Alan Hudson inspired Stoke
That's
City
right. That's
3-2
right.
victory,
Yeah,
and Leeds. But again, that season, Leeds United had gone back a week earlier because Don had a vision, and he says to the boys, "I want to win the league by going
that's right.
unbeaten."
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think you can do
yeah.
it because it was, I think, this season or the season before, there was speculation that Don was going to Everton, wasn't there?
There was. It was actually going to Everton
Mm.
when the European Cup Winners' Cup final that you talked about in '73.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He he'd made his mind up to go
Mm.
after that game. He were going to play. He were going to sign for Everton. There's no doubt about it. But after the treatment that Leeds got that night,
Yeah.
he abandoned all his other plans. And he said, we're with Leeds, we're starting again. And obviously they won the league the following year. But after the disappointment with Stoke, there's a lot of hatred with Stoke and Revie.
Yes.
And obviously that was a FA Cup final. But the Salonika one against AC Milan was incredible. Absolutely unbelievable. I did a book a few years ago called No Glossing Over It. And the two referees from those two finals, Kitchbachin was the Paris one, and Christos Michas was the one in Greece. And I could never find him. He was untraceable, never found him. I found the Paris one, which were interesting. But yeah, it was just bought that game. Fiat bought that game. There's no question about that.
Well, Alan says to me that because Sniffer didn't play that game, did he? I don't think John
Um,
played that game as well. Sniffer was banned. If they would have gone to a replay, I think he would have been
him,
eligible to play. But Alan
yeah,
wasn't there.
him and Billy got banned in the semi-final.
That's
Yeah,
right, yeah. And Alan was saying to me the boys had told him that the referee uh, turned up on the same players playing as the
he did.
AC Milan players.
He did. That's absolutely true. Yeah,
It's it's incredible, isn't it? I
it
mean,
is. It is. It is.
but
It was
again,
Fiat. It was definitely Fiat that bought that game. There's no question.
but when you going on when you won the first league championship at Anfield, it was
Yeah.
it
Oh,
was it
fantastic.
yeah it was Don that says to Billy and the boys, go and take the championship into the cup. and
Go
and
the
and the
cop. Yeah.
Liverpool fans were singing "Champions,
Mm.
Champions" to Leeds United. As you
Yeah,
say,
it was unbelievable.
there was a great camaraderie, great respect, and
It's
Don Revie
unbelievable.
and Bill
Yeah,
were
yeah,
best of buddies, wasn't they?
yeah. I can remember it as if it were yesterday. That it was 23rd of April, Monday night, and it was superb. They actually went to like you say, the top end.
Mm,
But me and my mate Andy Robinson, we were down at least up 10,000 that night
yeah.
in the end, and there were a few Leeds fans that corner, and me and Andy went on pitch,
Yeah.
and I still have a little bag of grass, which looks a little bit,
Right.
suspect now. I still have some of that turf. We've both got some of that turf that night, and it was a Monday night. We were both still at school. I'd wing my way to go to the game. Yeah, and it was incredible. Gary Sprake was absolutely fantastic that night. And it was 0-0, obviously, and they won the league. And then were crowned champions a couple of days later when Johnny Giles scored against Forest. So, and that was a record. At the time, it was a record 2 defeats in that season, and 67 points were a record at the time for two points for a win.
Did you not ever think about putting the grass into your lawn at home? Because it would have knitted in and it would have grown, and mind you probably moved. Terry Curran, when he played at Wembley for Southampton against Nottingham Forest in
Oh, I remember
'79.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Alan Ball said to him, because they used to have tankards in them days, when Leeds United won in '68 the League Cup, it wouldn't
Yeah,
have been a
yeah,
medal, it would have been a
yeah,
tankard. And Bally says, get that grass TC,
yeah.
put it in your lawn at home, and it'll grow. You might not ever get to Wembley again, and that's the thing with experience. You know what's round the corner. But Leeds
Yeah,
United, and Alan says to me, we played that many games at Wembley. We were almost at Wembley every other season. It was almost like a home fixture for Leeds United, playing at Wembley and
yeah,
playing in
yeah,
major
yeah,
tournaments. But
yeah,
72, I do want to talk a bit about 1972 and towards the end of Don's reign there. When you
yeah,
won the centenary FA Cup final with Alan
yeah.
Clark's wonderful diving headed goal, Sniffy was originally going to volley it, but the ball just dipped.
That's right. It just fell. Yeah,
Yeah, and he diving headed and put it in the corner. There was a Revie plan against Birmingham City that Paul Trevelyan literally wrote about in the Sunday People, and Don was always, from the early days of the late 50s to almost the end of his reign at Leeds United, he was ahead of the game, wasn't he? Because it was
oh yeah.
Schooler, the Cardiff City manager, who'd said that we could have beat Leeds United. If we'd have stopped
Mm-hmm.
Johnny Giles, we'd have beat Leeds United. And Don
Yeah, yeah,
says that
yeah,
you're having a laugh, ain't you, really? And then he
yeah.
said to the Beaver, you get older, Schooler, you do an interview, and we'll put that. And Freddie Goodwin, a former Leeds United player,
That's right. Yeah, yeah,
fell
yeah,
for the plan. Birmingham City dropped Gordon Taylor and played George Smith, and Leeds
yeah,
ran riot. And John said to
yeah.
me, the best that I asked him if he could relive one season, what season would it be? And he said the best year we had at Leeds United was 1972.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was just sparked with that Monday night game, wasn't it? You
Yeah,
know.
yeah. But again, straight
Uh,
after the FA Cup final, forced to
well, that'd
play
never
Wolverhampton
happen again.
Wanderers.
That
No.
that was that crazy. Alan Hardaker, who again didn't like Don Revie, and vice versa, to be fair.
Mm.
But Alan Hardaker didn't like Leeds United at all. And he blamed it on England playing. Well, he blamed it on two things. That England were playing the game, and they'd have to take the Leeds United players out of there. And because Don wanted it moving a few days later,
Yeah.
which is it's not unreasonable. But they wouldn't do it, and they had to play that. And then Leeds were unlucky that night, and they were robbed that night. To be fair, they were. And again, when I was talking to Mr. Pickwick, Roger Kirkpatrick,
Yeah.
he was actually an assessor that night, he was a referee's assessor, and he said he could not believe the decisions that were being made, and he wasn't allowed to say anything. It's Frank Monroe, there was a penalty, a handball, Frank Monroe, which Norman says he had it in his hand that long, he could have taken the laces out. You know, all these quotes, and it was just, and Leeds, obviously, Mick Jones had been injured in the final, he couldn't play, and a lot of players played with painkiller injections. Don used to ask him to play, even though somebody else could have stepped in, you know. He wanted them players in, and they played with pain-killing injections. And they were unlucky that night, but it were heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. But it just wasn't to be, really. It's one of them things. The players never got a chance to celebrate the FA Cup, really, because they had to set up and stay in Birmingham, you know. And it was just, I can remember that night as though it were. I mean, I actually had a gap weekend when Leeds played the FA Cup final. I actually left school on the Friday night, the 5th of May, and we went down in my dad's Ford Transit, and we stayed overnight, and had a gap weekend, watched the cup final, stayed in his transit, come home, and I started work on the Monday as a painter and decorator. And I told them I'd got another interview somewhere else, and they applauded me honestly, because I says, "That's great. I said, I'm happy where I am. I think I'm going to settle in here, but I need to go to this interview because it's courtesy, really." And I was going down to Molyneux. that was my first day at work. So, but yeah, that was my gap weekend, and what a fantastic weekend. But the Monday night spoiled it. They so deserved that double, you know. They really did. And there's not many of them left now, and it's a shame. There's 6 now left. I speak to David Harvey quite a bit, and he's a bit of a recluse now. Is David Harvey. But yeah, it's sad, really, that they deserved more, did Leeds, trophy-wise. Sometimes Don's overcautious. That lost us some. I'll grant you that. But a lot of times they were robbed. There's no doubt about that.
Well, Paul Trevelyan, a fantastic,
what a character,
yeah,
what a character.
A fantastic piece of Leeds United history. And again, he had to go and sell the idea, and it was like Don and Jack that he had to pretty much get it by, with the sock tags and the you know, all the waving to the crowd, the badge, the names on the back of the absolutely. Les Cocker as well, with the training, the kickabout before. Certainly, I think
kicking
the first time
kicking balls into the crowd,
and I think in 1972, I think that was the first time that anybody really had organised kickabouts, when Birmingham City played Leeds United in that semi-final. Right, and John said to me that was the best that Leeds United played all season.
Yeah. Birmingham played in red that day for some reason as well, didn't they?
Yeah, it did, yeah. Yeah, you absolutely battered us. But it was a great Leeds United side. I love the way that you've got in the book accounts from supporters that were there at the time. So pivotal moments, and you've gone to and you've referenced the person that was there at the time. So it's like all bases are covered, aren't they?
Yeah, that was my most favourite part of this book.
Yeah.
I put it out a couple of years ago, actually. I've been writing it for a couple of years. I put it out to people who were at them games, and a lot of I'm 67 now, well, 67 in March, and people are older than me that are still going, and I started. I wanted the stories. I wanted the real stuff, you know, and people that were there, and that's what makes the book for me. It makes it something different, you know. and these are all full accounts of people, plus people, opposition supporters that were there. I got a good response from, well, obviously you saw the Goodison Park Everton fans, and it were incredible, really. Sunderland, football is all about supporters.
Yeah.
Well, it used to be, and that's what I wanted, and that's what I wanted, something personal, and not just touching on another book. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Every Cloud, about it was Leeds, how Leeds United were formed out of Leeds City.
Yeah.
And the best part of that research for that book was going to people's houses that were descendants from people who'd either played for Leeds City or United, or who'd fought in the war, And I would treat like royalty, and it were they were heroes, and I were going into their house, and they were putting, not so much parties, but they were putting food out, and sort of like, oh, you're great, and they'd bring all the family, nieces and nephews, and Harry Duggan, who played for Leeds United in 1940s, and it was just incredible, and that's what I wanted, somebody who were there and who speaks about it and who talks about it, and that's history, and that's what football's all about for me. It's great. You get these stories that really mean something to people. Like somebody sat on a motorbike and a sidecar going to Scunthorpe, and somebody hitchhiking. That happened all the time, didn't it? People thumbing lifts to different parts of the country, and it were, it were great, fantastic. I'd love to go back. I would love to go back.
I think that us football fans of a certain age are very lucky, because you had those fan experiences, you had the players. I think the players of yesteryear were very lucky. Okay, they didn't earn the riches that the players of today earn, but there was an innocence, there was you're going to get to the game no matter how. You've got the accounts of those working class people. These days it's completely different, and I think it isn't the game that we got brought up loving. How long did it take you to collate all the stories and put it into this wonderful labour of love? And it was published by Pitch, wasn't it?
It was. I've written 4 now with Pitch, and they've been absolutely fantastic as Pitch. Paul Camillan and Jane, and they've been absolutely fantastic. I got on them when I joint wrote one with a mate of mine, Andy Starmore, and from then on went with Pitch, and they've been absolutely fantastic. They're really good sports book producers, and I've not got admiration for them. They've helped me along, and I'll give them an idea, and I'll say it's not going to be for another couple of years, and I've got this, and tell me to bugger off, or do you want to go with it? And they've been brilliant. They've been brilliant.
They do some fantastic publications, and
they really do.
And there are so many books that are quite different, but stories that need to be told. You look at the modern game, and I love football. I mean, we all love football, but again, it ain't the same. The historic content of this book is fantastic, and it's a book that needed to be written, because a lot of people don't understand. Okay, they see that Leeds United won a couple of honours in the 70s. They know of Don Revie and Billy Bremner. They can see the statues outside of Ellen Road. But behind that, there's a story, and it starts in the 50s. It starts when Don played football. It starts when Don was born in Middlesbrough and then played up through the ranks at Leicester, played Manchester City, joined Leeds United. and some of the fantastic managers that you've had in the past. Race Carter, to name just one.
Right.
I mean, one historic name that is Race Carter. Indelible
Yeah.
mark that he left on English football as well. So all these
Yeah.
things are in the book, and it's a must-read book for any football fan that loves. I suppose loves winners, loves one. For me, the greatest football team that we've seen, and how that team come about and how them characters got
Yeah.
involved at Leeds
Yeah.
United. And the stories of fantastic supporters as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
You've done a tremendous job, Gary. Can I thank you for your time, sir? Is there anything else that you would like to add? And what else are you going to add to your publications going forward, sir?
I don't know yet. I'm the next one that's in line, and thank you for your comments on that book. That is really really nice of you. And no plans at the minute, but we aren't actually doing we're in the middle of a massive project of Billy Bremner.
Right. Is it the
There's a big.
statue in Stirling, the university?
That's the one.
Yeah.
That's the one. Four of us started that in 2018.
Yeah.
We were going up and down on the train, and we were going into pubs and meeting people and blah blah blah. And it's finally taken off. We did some Zoom calls, but I don't like Zoom things.
Yeah.
And anyway, now it's the situation now where we've got there's about 20 different organisations on the Scotland side that are really into it. We've got kids from schools, St Modens, where Billy was in Raploch, where he was brought up. And now we're just working on the Leeds side, Temple Newsham part of Leeds, where Billy lived all his time. With Vicky, well, like you say, Don Revie brought Vicky down to Leeds. And we're on with that part now. And the money is coming in through heritage funds and grants and that. And there's a branch called Luscos. It's the Leeds United Supporters Club of Scandinavia, and they're just waiting in the wings to put a load of money into it. And they've got 8,000 members, and they've got quite a few bobbers and Vikings, So we're hoping it's going to go. But the statue was about 100,000. Don Revie's were 115.
Yeah.
So we're looking at that, and it's going to be built in Raploch, and we're behind that. So I'm thinking at the moment of doing a book on that, because it's from its early start, just going up to pubs in Glasgow and talking to people, and Dart stopping in mid-air at us because we were English, and once they found out what we wanted, it went from then. And we were speaking to people who knew Billy, and it was just brilliant. So that's probably my next thing. But just enjoy this book for now, and then we'll see where we go.
Absolutely. How can people follow that project that you and the boys are forwarding and are launching, and pretty much behind it and driving it forward? Because again, I did say earlier about Bremner and Giles, and I was listening to Talk Sport the other day, and Ali McCoist was on, and I think he said it was the 1998 World Cup finals, or it was around that time. And he'd interviewed Pele, and he says Pele hadn't got a clue who I was, and I was just a Scotsman just interviewing Pele. And Pele said, "How's Billy Bremner?" And
Brilliant.
and when people, like the great man Pele reference Billy Bremner, for the young ones, they do not realise how brilliant Billy was as a player, how instrumental he was to Leeds United, and it's something that should never ever be forgotten. And through projects that you're driving forward, Billy's life won't be forgotten, and taken so far too early. What was he, 55 when he
50,
passed away.
It was just short of 55. Yeah.
Yeah, and Alan Clark, I didn't realise, talking to Alan, I'm nobody's child. That was Billy's karaoke song, by the way.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, Alan Clark, absolutely adored him. And
Yeah.
when we speak now, and he does these Leeds legend things
Yeah.
that's going. He says, and there's a tear in his eye, and it's a genuine tear, you know. And he just says, "There's never a day goes by that I don't think of Billy." And that's true, is that? And that's a Midlander as well, you know, because he actually said, did Alan, didn't he? Well, he told you anyway, but you know that he came into Leeds, obviously from Fulham, then Leicester, as a bit of an outsider, and he said they were taking him straight away. And again, that would on Revie. He recognised that he needed something else other than Mick Jones, and it just really quickly that you're on about Pelly there. Nigel Davey was a reserve fullback with Leeds, and he played a good few games with Leeds, but it was always just an understudy, which Don always looked after.
Yes.
And he was really good friends with Terry Cooper, who lived in Tenerife, that died recently. And he was telling me about Terry. And they went to a function, and Pelly turned up, and he'd given Terry this envelope. He says, "I've been meaning to see you for a couple of years now, blah blah blah, and all that." And there were £10,000 in it. £10,000. He said there's certain players that had given these envelopes to, and I can back it up and that's, you know, and he thought it was just like his autograph and a couple of maybe keepsake, you know, just like keepsakes that go from the game, you know.
Wow.
£10,000.
But Alan said exactly.
Because he admired Terry Cooper. He admired Terry Cooper.
Yeah. I mean, Terry, what a great left back! One of the probably the greatest left back that England's ever had. Yeah. The great Terry Cooper. But Alan said exactly the same to me. And I've only really spoken to Alan once or twice when we were setting the interview up, the podcast up, and then we done it. And he said of Billy, he said I was like the brother he never had. We were that close, me and Billy. And he said to me, "There's not a day go by when I don't miss him."
It's true, is that?
And it's absolute genuine. And although he was born in Willenhall in Walsall area in the Black Country, he says I'm an honorary Yorkshireman, and his grandson's a Leeds United fan, so he's absolutely Leeds United through and through. And I think that's what your club does to people that get into the fabric of Leeds United. They take them into that white rose bosom, and they just make them one of you. And
once you're in, you're in.
Absolutely, you can't bloody get out, mate. Like like that Black Country route, they don't let us Brummies in or out.
Fantastic.
It's been a fantastic hour. Thanks so much, Gary, for your time. Please keep in touch, and all the best with the Billy Bremner statue. And if you're writing a book, and please give me a heads up, and we'll do another podcast. And if I can help you in any way going forward,
I'll give you a link. I'll give you a link to that, Billy, and
brilliant.
And we'll that's fantastic. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. And good luck to all at Leeds United Football Club as well. Thanks, Gary.
And you at Birmingham, mate. Thank you.
Cheers, pal. Appreciate it. Thanks for listening, guys.
Cheers. All the best, mate.
Thank
all
you.
The best.
Bye bye.